In today's video, we're taking a look at some NHL trade rumors, including some details on a potential big three-team trade that came really close to happening between the Flames, Jets, and Toronto Maple Leafs. We're also taking a look at the Penguins, Sabres, as well as a couple remaining of the free agents still on the market. We'll get into all the details coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today, including a big rumor for a big trade that never happened but came close, especially before we seen the Maple Leafs make a few other trades here, including their trade with Ottawa as well as the Colorado Avalanche. As we know, the Maple Leafs ended up trading a few key pieces, including Nazem Kadri and Connor Brown, and there's a lot of reports going around now indicating that Kadri actually is the one who nixed the trade to go to Calgary because of his modified no-trade clause that he had in his contract, which would have resulted here in this big three-team deal actually taking place. Now, the only part of this is not quite clear or really out there that I've seen so far is the pieces coming from the Winnipeg Jets. But the players believed to be involved here was Brown and Kadri from the Maple Leafs. And then on the Flames side, it's Mark Jankowski and TJ Brodie. Now, obviously, as we've seen here in different trades that the Leafs made involving their two players, Brown ended up going to the Senators in a package deal which brought them Cody Ceci. And, of course, also got rid of Nikita Zaitsev in that deal. And, of course, in the Avalanche trade, Kadri goes over in return for Tyson Barrie as well as some other pieces here. So, either way, they ended up getting some help on the blue line in both cases. Now, like I said, it's not quite clear the exact pieces involved with the Jets. My best guess here is that the Winnipeg Jets were likely going to be receiving one of the forwards. It was also believed that Kadri had nixed a deal to go to Winnipeg earlier as well, so I don't think they were going to go down that road here yet again. Perhaps Jankowski was going to the Jets to be one of their top three center icemen. Not exactly sure. Not all the details are, fully available here and fully clear. And obviously some of this is still speculation. But there's numerous reports out there that these three teams, all Canadian teams, of course, came very close to making a massive three-team trade here before we saw these other deals go down. So obviously, if that would have happened, we likely wouldn't have seen the deal between the Leafs and the Senators because Connor Brown wouldn't have been available, where he was used as a sweetener piece to go with the Zaitsev contract. So obviously that would have changed that quite substantially, likely wouldn't have happened. And of course the Avalanche deal, which brought them Tyson Barrie, Kadri would have already been moved, so that likely wouldn't have happened either. So things would have worked out to be quite a bit different had that three-team trade actually ended up taking place here. But Kadri is the one who nixed the deal because of his no-trade clause in his contract. So, of course, as always, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this potential three-team trade. Even though we don't know all the parts involved here, it's believed that the Maple Leafs likely would have been receiving TJ Brodie as the defenseman here. Obviously, that instead of Tyson Barrie, which would have been a similar type of situation. He's a pending UFA defenseman on his final year of his contract, although he might not be able to command such a big price tag for his next contract. So, hard to say, and of course, if Jankowski was going to the Maple Leafs, he would have been a little bit cheaper than Alex Kerfoot, based on his current contract and where things are at. They might have been able to save a little bit of money that way, but at the same time, is it better to save the money, or is it better to have these other players who came in anyways? Now, regardless of who comes in as that defenseman, whether it be Tyson Barrie, TJ Brodie, or anybody else, it will be difficult for them to retain that player beyond the coming season just because of salary cap implications and that they're all going to likely be wanting more money than they're currently making here. So I guess let me know what you think down below. Do you think the three-team trade might have been a better deal, or were they better off to do what they had? Based on not knowing the full details of the three-team trade, I think the Leafs made out just fine here. Obviously, the Kadri for Barrie trade helps both teams quite substantially. In the Ottawa trade, they bring in Cody Ceci, get rid of Nikita Zaitsev. Ceci, even though he's had his struggles as well, they're only tied to him for that one season, so they get rid of all that term. Yes, they have to give up Connor Brown as a bit of a sweetener, which kind of sucks, but helps them with their cap situation. And really, overall, is a nice win for Ottawa for taking on that term for Zaitsev and get Zaitsev and Ceci both a fresh start. So I really think the Leafs made out just fine. They might have been able to save a little bit extra money this way, but overall, I think they get the better players and better deals, and I think it all worked out here in the end anyways. Now, taking a look here at the Buffalo Sabres, obviously they recently signed Marcus Johansson to a 2-year free agent contract here, which is a really nice deal, I think, in my opinion, for the Sabres. It's a quality signing, $4.5 million. They gave him a modified no trade, but really he's played rather well for a variety of teams now throughout his career, and I think he could be an excellent middle six type of forward. Can play up and down the lineup here, be a versatile guy. So I really like the addition of Johansson to the Sabres lineup. Unfortunately, though, that does tie up a lot of their remaining cap space, so it is speculated here even more than before that the Sabres likely will end up making a trade. As you'll see here from the snapshot from Cap Friendly, they have about $6 million in salary cap space remaining, and they have 4 RFAs left to sign here as well. So obviously 4 contracts. None of them are expected to be big amounts, but still, that's going to eat away at that $6 million quite a bit, and they likely would like to have more flexibility here. So of course that likely increases the possibility they could look to trade Rasmus Ristolainen, although I'm not entirely convinced that they'd like to go down that road, because ideally I think they would consider it, but it's going to have to be a pretty solid player coming back, ideally a number 2 center. I think they'd like to take the pressure off Casey Middlestat, bump him down the lineup like we've discussed here before. I think that would be great for the team longer term, and Ristolainen likely could be the guy to bring that player back, but they also have some other options as well if they just want to do some cost cutting measures, because they do have a lot of forwards under contract, including 5 that are pending unrestricted free agents heading into the current season. Now, out of the 5, 2 of them are probably unlikely to be traded at least before the start of the year because they were just signed or acquired, and that includes Jimmy Vesey, who they just brought over from the Rangers. So where they just got him, I can't imagine they're going to trade him already. And they just signed Gergensons as well to a 1-year deal. So I would think they're going to give him a shot with Ralph Kruger, and his value would be low right now anyways. But they do have 3 other forwards that are heading into the season here as a pending UFA. Those other 3 players include Vladimir Sobotka, Scott Wilson, and Connor Sherry. So we'll see. I mean, personally, I think Sherry would probably have the most value out of the 3. Sobotka didn't have a great year last year in Buffalo after coming over in that St. Louis trade for Ryan O'Reilly. Scott Wilson's really primarily a depth forward, maybe a 4th liner for most teams. Don't really see a ton of value there. But Sherry would have a little bit more value to bring back something, it's a little bit more useful here longer term. So I guess we'll see, but the Sabres certainly are expected to make some moves. They could go a little bit more of a minor way, shedding one of their forwards. Or if they can find the right deal, bring back that solid number 2 center that they'd really like to acquire here, then I do think Ristolainen will be the guy to get that accomplished. Now jumping over, take a look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're also up against the cap after signing Brandon Tan after that 6-year contract. It's only $3.5 million, but really they don't have a ton of cap space. And I'll give you another snapshot of their cap space situation from Cap Friendly here as well. That only leaves them with $1.5 million approximately in salary cap space, and they do have their own RFAs to sign here as well, including defenseman Marcus Pettersson and forward Zach Aston-Reese and Teddy Bluger. Now, of course, Bluger actually looked pretty good coming down the stretch here. He get an opportunity later in the season. Pettersson seemed to be a nice fit on that back end after he was acquired from Anaheim, so I can't imagine they're going to want to move the guys that are not signed. But, of course, the names that keep coming up in the rumor mill for the Penguins to shed some salary and cut some cost here include forwards Brian Rust, Patrick Hornqvist, and Nick Bjugstad. Now, out of the 3, personally, even though if you take a look at what might make sense, I do think Patrick Hornqvist would prove to be the most difficult to move, partially because they give him a no-trade clause. He's 32 years old, 4 years left on his contract, over $5 million. Hornqvist has certainly proved to be a pretty solid player and a pretty valuable member of that top 6 forward group, and I really don't know if the Penguins are really going to want to mess with that. He's been timely for them. He's good in front of the net, plays that physical brand of hockey in your face, and really is a unique type of player that they don't have much of. So I really don't know if they go down that road. Based on the contract, I can see it making sense, but it's going to be difficult to do anyways. Of course, you get Brian Rust making over $3 million as well. He's been a little bit inconsistent at times. At the same time, though, Rust has proven valuable at times as well, but obviously the consistency might prove to be difficult to justify keeping him on the team. But to me, the most likely out of the 3 would be Nick Bjugstad if they can shed that salary. Since coming over from Florida, he didn't really grab that 3rd-line center role. I think that's kind of what they had in mind when they brought him over. I do think Bjugstad is expendable here. Of course, they also brought in Alex Galchenyuk. They also brought in Dominic Cahoon. They've had a fair bit of change to their forward group throughout the year. Between Bjugstad and McCann, who came over from the Panthers, I think McCann seemed to fit in a little bit better. So I can see them trying to use Bjugstad as potential trade bait here to shed some salary. Wouldn't rule out the possibility as well where they tried to do it before of maybe trading defenseman Jack Johnson. It might be a little bit less likely now, and I'm not sure what they'd have to pair him with to gain any interest based on the contract. But I don't think Bjugstad's going to be that sweetener because really he hasn't had the greatest year last year. But I can see either of those guys being the preferred players to trade. So obviously they're going to have to make a move here of some sort. So we'll see what they decide to do here. Canucks reporter Rick Dhaliwal is reporting that Brock Besser and the Vancouver Canucks are getting closer to getting a contract extension here in place for the restricted free agent, but there's still work to do that neither side seems to be budging. I'm not quite sure exactly what the problems are, what they're having trouble coming to an agreement are. If it's more term, is it more money? I'm guessing it's probably term. I know right now a lot of teams would like to lock up their RFAs to 7-8 year contracts if possible and make sure they're there for the long haul and get them under contract for a good fair value here. But many of their RFAs want to go shorter term. They really want to bet on themselves, especially the top players here, and Besser certainly would qualify as that. The cap's expected to rise significantly in a couple of years' time. They want to be able to cash in again when the cap goes up higher. They've seen some other guys, prime example being Nathan McKinnon, who's on a very valuable contract right now for the Avalanche. Obviously, he really exploded after signing that contract, and now he's well worth much more than what he's making. Even look at Brad Marchand, for example. Look at the contract that he has, making $6 million, putting up 100-point season. So there's many guys around the league that are on very much team-friendly contracts. I see the attractiveness to want to lock them up long-term and save the money, but from the player standpoint, if they go shorter term, bet on themselves, stay healthy and produce, then they're going to cash in and make way more money in the long haul. So we'll see what happens, but Dollywall is saying that Besser and the Canucks are getting close. A couple UFAs on the market that were not expected to be on the market this long, likely what many people felt would have signed on the first day, include Jake Gardiner and Ryan Dzingel. Larry Brooks of the New York Post is reporting that Dzingel might be having some red flags around him, that GMs are a little leery of locking him up longer term. Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Suns reporting that before he was ever traded out of Ottawa, when they were negotiating an extension, they had offered him a 5-year, $5 million contract, which he turned down, which he very well might be regretting now, because obviously other things are not working out. But I know teams could be trying to free up cap space to sign some of these players. But Dzingel does not look to be going back to Columbus. I don't think he really worked out with John Tortorella. That just wasn't a good mesh at all. He ended up being scratched in the playoffs at one point and just didn't really seem to fit there. So even though many believe that Dzingel might stay with Columbus and might be one of the less risky UFAs for them to acquire at the deadline because of his ties to the area after attending Ohio State, that he may well be likely to stay, but it's not looking that way right now. But either way, I do think he'll get signed. Obviously, he's had some good seasons, and even with the struggles in Columbus at the end of the year, it still ended up being a career season for him. So I do think a team will end up taking him on here, probably for a fairly barren contract. He's going to have to come down after what he's looking for on term and money and get signed at some point here, because teams are not going to have more space as the summer goes on. There's lots of teams that apparently have shown interest, but yet no signing. So what is the holdup here? What's seems to be shying teams away from locking him down? He's not that old. He's incredibly fast. He keeps producing and improving every year. So there's got to be something out there that's kind of causing him to be hesitant here. Now, on Jake Gardiner's front, the hesitation is the back injury. That's what many believe that are taking teams longer to sign. Now, part of that as well might be that Jake Gardiner really wants to return to Toronto and is waiting for them to figure out a way to make it happen. But I just don't see it happening at all. They've really reshaped that blue line quite substantially here with all the trades they've made in the offseason. And I just don't, based on the cap here and the fact that they still have to sign Marner, we don't know where that's going to come in exactly, but still, they're going to be struggling as it is with their cap situation to get a Marner contract in place and line it up and then look after anything else that they need to do here, let alone bring in Jake Gardiner. Even a discount for Gardiner would be, say, $5 million. That's still a nice haircut for him to come back to the Leafs. I just don't even see how they could do that. So I'm not sure that if it's really a case of Gardiner waiting around for the Leafs that I've seen some people report on. Obviously, other teams, though, have shown interest, and it seems to be more the back injury that are holding teams up here. He's going to likely have to accept a shorter-term deal, prove himself that he's healthy and can still contribute like he used to before, and then re-up here in a couple of years' time is likely what's going to have to be the case. And also here, the Seattle franchise is looking to hire a general manager. As we know, it's not a guarantee that they do it this summer, but they will do it if they find the right candidate that they're confident and comfortable with. And one name that apparently keeps coming up on a variety of reports I've seen mentioned by numerous sources here for NHL reporters is Ron Francis, the former GM of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, prior to this, we had heard a lot of different names before, including Kelly McCrimmon, who ended up becoming the GM in Vegas and remained there. He was one of the top assistants around the NHL. Of course, the other name that was linked heavily to Vegas before as well was Ken Holland, who's now the GM in Edmonton on a new contract. So the top names that were being speculated before are no longer in play, and many believe that Ron Francis might be the guy. And even though after Tom Dundon took over from the Hurricanes, Ron Francis being let go was one of his first moves, I'm really not convinced that Ron Francis really did that terrible of a job. I mean, you might be able to look at some of the trades he made. Maybe I have to go back and analyze it, really, to be honest. But I will say this, based on their drafting record while he was the GM, and I realize they rely on their amateur scouts for the draft. Obviously, at the end of the day, the GM has the final say on some of these calls. And really, they drafted well. They've got a lot of good prospects. So I really don't think he did that bad of a job to really deserve to be let go as soon as he did when Dundon took over. That very well could have been more of a cost-cutting measure. As we know, he was trying to find ways to save money and move money around and allocate it to different areas to try to improve the team. And we'll see here. So obviously, Ron Francis is looking to get back into the game. We've seen that report on numerous cases here, and he might prove to be the candidate that Seattle is looking for. Now, So that is all your latest NHL rumors here for today. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the subscribe button here to subscribe for daily content. Put on a notification bell so you don't miss any future content as well. And if you're not up to date with all the latest NHL signings, check out my video over here where we just updated it here yesterday with all the latest NHL free agent signings. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.